You feel that something is out of place, but you can't identify exactly what it is. You wake up every day feeling like you're living a life that doesn't belong to you. Perhaps you've already tried everything: therapy, self-help books, advice from friends. But the emptiness persists, an uncomfortable feeling of being on the wrong path, a path that doesn't represent you. And do you know why this happens? Because maybe you really are deviating from who you truly are. This doesn't mean you're broken, but that you've moved away from your true essence. Carl Gustav Jung, one of the greatest scholars of the human psyche, said that we are all born with an internal map. He called this the soul map, a deep guide that directs us to our true nature. However, there is an obstacle. Almost no one learns to interpret it. We've been taught from an early age to follow other people's maps, those of society, family, culture. Without realizing it, we begin to follow paths that take us away from who we really are. We choose paths that don't reflect our essence. We're in relationships that drain us. We wear masks to fit in where we shouldn't be. Over time, this dissonance transforms into pain, anguish, and apathy. The soul map isn't just a poetic metaphor, it's real. Jung dedicated his life to exploring it, mapping the territories of the psyche, the archetypes, the unconscious, the shadow, the self. His discovery was both frightening and liberating. Much of our suffering doesn't come from chance, but from ignoring this map, from living to please the external instead of following the calls of our soul. If you feel lost, adrift, even when you strive to move forward, this video is for you. Here, I won't offer a magic formula. I'll provide you with something more valuable, a return to what you already carry within yourself. The truth is that your soul has been trying to communicate for a long time. Through dreams, crises, and uncomfortable silences. You just haven't learned to listen. Jung believed that feelings of emptiness, failure, and confusion are, in fact, invitations. Invitations to begin the most meaningful journey of your life. The journey of individuation, of reconnecting with who you truly are. So, if you're tired of feeling inadequate, exhausted from pretending you're fine when inside you're in pieces, remember, you're not alone, nor are you broken. Your suffering is not a defect. It's a sign, a calling. And if you have the courage to respond, to delve deeper and face your inner unknown, you'll discover that what seemed like weakness was just a detour. That the darkness was the prelude to your own light. This video is an invitation. A map in the right hands can change your life. The question is, are you willing to reveal it? Imagine that within you there exists a vast, mysterious territory, filled with symbolic forests, emotional abysses, mountains of forgotten wisdom, and underground rivers of desire and fear. This territory can be explored, understood, and mapped. This is what Jung offers us with his theory of the soul map, a true cartography of the human psyche, built not with compasses and satellites, but with dreams, myths, symbols, and human suffering. For Jung, the soul map is not linear, rational, or logical. It's a set of living symbols that emerge from the depths of the unconscious. Contrary to what we've been taught, the psyche is not just a collection of random thoughts. It is structured. It has a center, the self, a social facade, the persona, a field of hidden conflicts, the shadow, and internal figures that represent the feminine and masculine, anima and animus. From the tension between these forces arise our dilemmas, traumas, dreams, and yearnings. The ego, what you think you are, is just the starting point. It believes it's in control, but in reality, it's like a lost traveler in a forest without a map or compass. Many feel lost because they try to decide based on a superficial self, disconnected from the totality of the psyche, without understanding that there are much deeper forces behind each choice, blockage, and impulse. Jung discovered this by exploring his own dreams and visions, diving into an intensive process of self-analysis. In this dive, he began to recognize recurring symbolic patterns, universal images that appeared both in his own dreams and in those of his patients, and which also appeared in mythologies, religions, fairy tales, and art. Jung called them archetypes, the fundamental elements of the soul map. They act as ancestral landmarks, indicating key points in the human journey: birth, death, love, loss, rebirth. We all travel this path in a unique way, but always passing through the same portals. Most importantly, this map is not just for understanding, it's for transformation. Through individuation, the central journey in Jungian psychology, we are called to stop being just a reactive and limited ego, to become an integrated self, someone who lives authentically, aligned with their deepest essence. This process is not easy. It involves confronting the shadow, detaching from the persona, and facing the unconscious. But it's the path to a meaningful life. Ignoring this map transforms life into a succession of mistakes, repetitions, and frustrations. When we begin to understand it, even in a fragmented way, we realize that each symptom, crisis, and pain is an internal message. The soul doesn't shout, it whispers. And those who don't hear the whispers of the soul end up hearing the screams of the body: anxiety, depression, loss of meaning. Now that you understand what this map is, perhaps you wonder where exactly you are on it. How do you know if you're on the right path or if you're getting lost? That's what we'll talk about in the next part. The anatomy of the soul according to Jung, and how to recognize the signs that you're off your path. If the soul has a map, it also has a structure. Understanding this structure is fundamental, not only to locate yourself, but also to understand why you are where you are. Jung compared the psyche to a house with many rooms, levels, and secret corridors. Most people live confined to just one of these rooms, the ego. Ignoring the deep forces is like trying to navigate the ocean by looking only at the surface. Let's start where everyone starts: the ego. It is the center of your consciousness, the self you think you are. It's necessary, but limited. The ego organizes the perception of reality, but it's only a small part of your soul. Surrounded by forces it doesn't control. Below it is the personal unconscious, where repressed memories, unresolved traumas, and denied desires reside. There reside the complexes, emotional causes that control behaviors without you realizing it. Have you ever felt that you make the same mistakes repeatedly? Always attract the same type of relationship? Or run away from something you can't define? That's the personal unconscious acting. But Jung went further, identifying a deeper universal layer shared by all, the collective unconscious. It's in this layer that the archetypes reside, primordial images that shape our life experience. Regardless of your origin or era, we all carry these archetypal figures: the hero, the mother, the wise old man, the child, the rebel, the lover. These archetypes are not just symbols. They are living forces that influence our desires, choices, fears, and impulses. Between the ego and the self, which is the organizing nucleus of the psychic totality, there are three fundamental structures that influence how we relate to the world and to ourselves: persona, shadow, and the archetypes of the opposite sex, anima and animus. The persona is the social mask used to adapt and survive. It's the role you play to be accepted, like the exemplary child, the competent professional, or the ideal partner. Useful, but dangerous. Because the more you identify with this mask, the more you move away from your essence. The persona is like a garment for the soul to go out in public, but it should not be confused with your true identity. The shadow, on the other hand, is the opposite. It represents everything you hide, reject, or deny in yourself. Flaws, unacceptable desires, anger, envy, jealousy, shame. But the shadow also contains hidden potentials, repressed talents, unrecognized strength, stifled creativity. Facing the shadow is painful, but essential, because what you don't integrate dominates you. Everything you don't accept in yourself, you project onto others. What you hate in others is often what you can't bear to admit in yourself. And then we have anima and animus, the internal figures of the opposite sex within each of us. For men, the anima represents the internal feminine principle: sensitivity, intuition, receptivity, connection with the unconscious. For women, the animus represents the internal masculine principle: reason, action, firmness, direction. These figures don't refer to gender, but to psychic polarities. Ignored, they manifest in distorted ways. In toxic relationships, destructive idealizations, or emotional rigidity. Integrated, they become bridges to the self, paving the way for a more complete, balanced, and creative psyche. Finally, at the deepest center of the soul, we find the self, the true you, not what you think you are, but what you are in essence. The self is totality, integration, balance. It's the inner voice that calls you to evolution, individuation, and a reconnection with your deepest truth. When you live far from the self, you feel scattered, exhausted, and empty. When you approach it, you discover meaning, purpose, and direction. The modern tragedy is that we've been trained to prioritize the exterior and ignore these inner truths. We are educated to please, compete, and show, not to feel, integrate, and understand. This causes many to live in conflict, trapped in fragile personas, fleeing from the shadow and disconnected from the self. Without recognizing anima and animus in relationships, with the understanding of the structure of your soul, the question arises: what happens when all this is ignored? What occurs when living only as an ego, shaped by the persona, without listening to the self? This will be addressed in the next part. The modern errors. How society pushes us toward routes that take us away from the soul, deteriorating our essence. If this content made sense to you, subscribe to the channel for more reflections. Have you ever wondered why so many today live anxious, depressed, and exhausted, even with apparent success? Why do people who have everything feel empty? According to Jung, this happens because most don't live authentically, but borrowed. We follow scripts not written by us, pursue goals without questioning them, and lose ourselves in identities we didn't choose. Modern society values appearance, performance, and productivity. From a young age, we're taught to compete, win, please. They tell us who we should be, what to desire, how to act. We then create a socially accepted persona, increasingly distant from the self. We become experts at performing, but amateurs in the art of living fully. It begins in childhood, when we learn that feeling is weakness, making mistakes is unacceptable, and showing vulnerability is dangerous. We repress the shadow to avoid rejection, hide creative impulses fearing judgment, replacing our desires with external expectations. Thus, gradually, we move away from our center. When we realize it, we don't know who we are, only who we've learned to be. In adulthood, the deviation intensifies. The pressure to adjust to the model of success is overwhelming. Solid career, stable relationship, social status, perfect appearance. The soul is forgotten, but the self doesn't disappear. It just screams. And its screams are symptoms: anxiety, existential crises, addictions, psychosomatic illnesses, empty relationships, a fatigue that rest doesn't resolve. Jung saw these manifestations not as failures, but as alerts from the soul, indicating that we live far from our center and our truth. We live in a culture that idolizes extroversion, but not everyone was born to be seen. Some were born to see, create, heal, for silence and observation. By standardizing life ideals, modern culture transforms unique talents into apparent defects. The introspective is shy, the sensitive fragile, the reflective slow. Entire archetypes are suffocated, the healer ignored, the artist mocked, the mystic ridiculed. Worse, our society doesn't just ignore the unconscious, it fears it. And what it fears, it pathologizes. This results in a generation that feels broken for not fitting into a mold that was never suitable. But there is a way out. Jung believed that suffering is the beginning of healing, as it forces us to stop, look inward, and question. At this moment, with courage, we can begin the return to the self, which Jung called individuation. This return begins with a crucial step, recognizing the signs that we are off our path. These symptoms are not failures, but compasses, sensations that, if listened to carefully, indicate the way back to the soul. In the next part, we'll explore what it means to be on the wrong path. What are the invisible signs? The emotional symptoms, the repetitive patterns that indicate you're moving away from your true essence, and how to begin to return. Being on the wrong path isn't just about bad decisions or external consequences. In Jung's profound view, it means living disconnected from your essence, from your internal truth. And this always has a cost. The soul notices when you move away from the center. Even if the mind tries to rationalize or ignore, the signs appear. They first emerge subtly, as restlessness, inexplicable boredom, small discomforts. However, if ignored, the soul begins to scream. These screams are loud enough to paralyze your life. The first symptoms are often emotional, a fatigue that doesn't disappear with rest, anxiety without apparent cause. A persistent sadness appears when everything should be fine. You may have professional success, a stable relationship, an organized routine, and still feel empty, as if something in you is silently dying. It's like watching life from the outside, a spectator. Next come the repetitive patterns, relationships that always end the same way, cycles of self-sabotage, decisions that cancel each other out. You feel like you're walking in circles, trapped in a labyrinth with a map drawn by someone else. This happens because, by moving away from the self, you live under the control of autonomous complexes, emotional fragments that command your psyche and lead you to repeat mistakes, even knowing the result. It's like watching a movie whose ending is known, but impossible to stop watching. Another indication that you're off your path is the feeling of internal falseness. Even while maintaining an appearance of normality, you may feel like you're acting, lying to yourself. Life loses color, passion, meaning. The more you try to distract yourself, keep busy, accelerate, the more evident the inner abyss becomes. Life loses its flavor. Days become repetitive, all because you live outwardly but die inside. And there's something even deeper. When away from the self, dreams change. They become more symbolic, intense, disturbing. The unconscious sends clear messages that something important is being neglected. Jung saw dreams as letters sent by the self, and the greater the distance between you and your center, the more urgent the content becomes. Images of falls, blocked paths, abandoned houses, threatening figures, all are symbolic expressions of a soul trying to guide you back. Sensitivity is needed to interpret and courage to follow. Why does this happen? Because the self, the totality of your soul, seeks for you to become who you truly are. It will not rest until this happens. Jung called this process individuation, which is uncomfortable and challenging, as it requires facing everything that has been repressed. Your shadow, fears, hidden desires, forgotten potentials. Above all, it requires a dive into the unknown, into what you are not yet, but can become. If you feel lost, repeating patterns, emotionally drained, or living a life that doesn't seem like yours. That is the call, not as punishment, but as invitation. You are not being punished, but awakened. This is where the next step of the journey comes in. How to begin walking back to the self. How to use this soul map in practice to rediscover meaning, reconnect with yourself, and transform pain into direction. In the next part, we'll explore the tools and principles that Jung proposed to transform suffering into consciousness and disorientation into clarity. You've already understood that there is a map, that the soul has a structure, that society teaches us to ignore it, and that symptoms are compasses disguised as pain. Now, the question is, how to return, find the way back, leave the surface of the persona, and reach the core of the self. The answer isn't simple, as the journey of individuation is unique for each person. Jung left a set of principles, practices, and symbols as navigation tools. He knew that the return to the center isn't done with logical reasoning or willpower. Because what's at stake isn't a problem to be solved, but a soul to be heard. The first tool is dream observation. Jung emphasized that dreams are manifestations of the unconscious, symbolic messages from the self. They reveal hidden truths, unconscious patterns, repressed desires, and indicate directions. To understand them, one must learn to read the symbolic language. Dreams speak in metaphors, images, atmospheres. A collapsing path may indicate the collapse of a limiting belief. A wild animal chasing you may represent a repressed impulse to be integrated. Each dream is a fragment of your map. The second tool is active imagination, a technique developed by Jung to dialogue with the internal figures of the psyche. It consists of allowing images from the unconscious to manifest in a waking state, through writing, drawing, visualization, or meditation. Active imagination is not fantasy, it is listening. It's placing yourself before the inner unknown with presence and courage. It's opening space for the unconscious to manifest, not as an enemy, but as an ally. An indispensable path is facing the shadow. This implies looking at what you reject in yourself without judgment or escape. It's recognizing dark impulses, resentments, and vulnerabilities that you hide even from yourself. It's also recognizing forgotten talents, suppressed desires, and stifled potentials. The shadow is not something to be fought, but a part of your soul that seeks recognition. Without it, individuation is not possible. Additionally, it's crucial to understand the role of the persona and learn to consciously dismantle it. Identify the masks you wear at work, in relationships, and on social media. Understand why they were built. Having a persona isn't the problem. We all have one. The problem is believing that you are the persona. When you identify with the mask, the self becomes inaccessible. By beginning to dismantle it, the true self begins to emerge. It's equally important to integrate anima and animus. This requires deep inner listening. For men, developing the anima is cultivating sensitivity, intuition, and embracing the unconscious. For women, integrating the animus means accessing deep reason, internal direction, and assertiveness that comes from the center. When these polarities are denied, we project onto others what we lack, generating symbiotic and unbalanced relationships. Integrated, we become complete. Finally, there is an element that permeates this entire journey: inner silence. We live in times of constant noise, but it is in silence that the self manifests. Hurry is the enemy of the soul. Individuation requires pause, presence, solitude, not as escape, but as spiritual practice. Only in silence can you hear yourself without the filter of the world. These practices are not ready-made formulas. They are doors, tools, keys. Each person must find their rhythm, time, and way of walking. The only prerequisite is the willingness to confront yourself in a deep, honest, and radical manner. But there is a common trap for those who begin this journey. The idea that you need to become another person to achieve wholeness. Jung taught the opposite. The goal of individuation is not to become someone new, but to become who you have always been without knowing. This brings us to the deepest part of the journey, integration, the point where the fragmented parts begin to unite and true identity emerges from chaos. In the next part, we'll explore what it means to integrate all these aspects of the psyche, how integration not only heals but liberates. We've reached the crucial point of the journey, integration, where the structure of the soul, the deviations, the symptoms of disconnection, and the tools for return converge to this moment. It's when everything that was separated begins to unite, where the lost pieces of the soul come together, and what was repressed or fragmented finally aligns with who you truly are. But what does it really mean to integrate? It's not eliminating what is uncomfortable or purifying yourself of negative feelings, nor transforming into an idealized version. That is spiritual ego, just another disguised persona. To integrate is to radically accept all parts within you. It's seeing that light and shadow are not enemies, but complementary, that weakness and strength balance each other, that within you coexist the creator and the destroyer, the healer and the wounded, the rebel and the compliant. And only by giving space to all these internal voices can you find your true voice. Jung said that individuation is the process of becoming genuinely who you are. Although it seems simple, this is one of the most challenging tasks of existence, as it requires courage to detach from what is comfortable and abandon identities that have protected you over the years. It's stopping the search outside for what can only be found within. Integration happens when you give up trying to be someone else and surrender to being complete. The journey begins with awareness, when you recognize that you have a persona, but don't confuse yourself with it, when you see your shadow, but don't define yourself by it, when you find anima or animus and learn to listen to them, when you connect to the self not as an idea, but as a living presence. From this point, life ceases to be a battlefield between opposites and transforms into a space for internal dialogue. This causes profound effects. Anxiety begins to diminish, not because you've learned to control it, but because it no longer needs to shout to be heard. Relationships become more sincere, because you don't project onto others what is missing in yourself. Unconscious repetitions dissolve, because now there is someone in command, and that someone is you, complete. To integrate is to heal, but not just in a superficial way. It's healing the internal cracks caused by years of denial and adaptation. It's restoring the bond with your soul. It's living with direction, not as someone seeking a concrete destination, but as someone who knows where they come from. It's converting pain into power, confusion into clarity, and emptiness into fertile ground. Remember, this journey is endless. Integration is not a destination, but a continuous process, a dance between the conscious and the unconscious, between the known and the unknown. With each new cycle of your life, you become more whole, more authentic, more free. If something in this video resonated, if some word spoke directly to your soul, leave a comment. Tell us, what part of the journey are you on? What part of your soul feels like it's trying to come home? Your voice could be the beginning of a journey for someone. If you've made it this far, don't stop. The next video will continue this journey. It's as important as this one. Sometimes, an idea can transform the course of your life. Keep watching. Your soul will thank you. Have you ever noticed how pain seems endless, no matter how hard you try to resolve it? Even when life appears to be good, there's this persistent weight, as if something is always misaligned. Perhaps you've already tried everything, meditating, asking for help, pretending you don't feel anything. But the pain persists, silent and constant. Let me tell you something, even though no one has had the courage to say it yet. Much of your suffering doesn't come from outside, but from within. From parts of yourself that have been left behind, rejected. Jung summarized it perfectly. What is not brought to consciousness returns as fate. Perhaps life is showing you something valuable, but you close your eyes. You keep busy, develop addictions, form relationships just to silence the emptiness. You promise yourself it will pass, but it doesn't. Do you know why? Because pain doesn't want to be abandoned, but illuminated. This video isn't an easy self-help text. I'm not bringing phrases to make you feel better immediately, but rather an invitation to confrontation, to truth, to self-knowledge. Give me just a few minutes, and I'll show you not only why you suffer, but how you can free yourself from this cycle. Not with miracle formulas, but with perhaps today you feel like you've hit rock bottom. Maybe you're on the verge of collapse, smiling on the outside while everything inside you is crying for help. Or perhaps you've learned to live with the pain, as if it were an inseparable part of your identity. In any of these scenarios, I need to be honest. There's an uncomfortable truth you need to face. The pain continues because you haven't yet dared to go to its root. Jung spent his life exploring this shadowy territory of the psyche. He understood that the only real light comes from those who have the courage to traverse their own darkness. If you're up for this challenge with me, I promise you, something will change. What we'll reveal together can transform the way you look at yourself, your suffering, and what it means to be free. Perhaps you believe your anguish is a consequence of a difficult boss, partner, lack of recognition, or the weight of external demands. Of course, all of this weighs on you, demands from you, hurts you. But what you still need to realize, and the time has come to see, is that the deepest suffering, the kind that paralyzes and echoes in silence, is born from the estrangement from who you essentially are. Jung said that nothing is more tragic than living a life that doesn't belong to you. And at some point, that's what happened. You learned early on to adapt, to please, to fit into others' molds. And you gradually disconnected from yourself, becoming a character to avoid confrontation, a fitted piece to avoid causing trouble. You silenced your desires, suffocated your feelings, dissolved your anger, and concealed your sadness. Perhaps today you carry a pain you can't even explain. A contained pain, almost mute, but one that slowly consumes you. This is the symptom of someone disconnected from themselves, of someone who looks at their own reflection and no longer knows who they see. You've adapted to a role, frozen emotions, but your soul still feels. It manifests through anxiety, exhaustion, apathy, guilt. Emotional pain is like a car alarm that goes off when something is wrong inside. The truth is, it's not failure that really hurts, but the unrealistic expectations about who you should be. It's not loneliness. It's the emptiness of someone who has lost themselves. It's not others who cause so much pain. It's ourselves whenever we sacrifice our essence to please or belong. As long as this distance from yourself exists, any attempt at healing will be insufficient. But here lies the secret. This pain isn't there to punish you. Jung saw suffering as the beginning of true change. The pain exists to call you back home, back to yourself. This return journey begins the moment we stop running and become willing to hear what has been muffled, ignored, dormant. In the continuation, we'll explore the paradoxically dangerous and liberating force of the psyche, your shadow. It's by confronting this disowned part that we rediscover healing. If this content is making sense to you, subscribe so you don't miss the upcoming videos. We have a lot to show you. Gratitude for your support. You seek to stop suffering, but you continue waging war against symptoms, anxiety, guilt, anger, sadness, as if they were your greatest enemies. You do everything to silence them, eliminate them, hide them, but forget to look at what really matters, the root of the problem. The true enemy isn't out there. It lives within, quiet, lurking. And that's where the greatest danger lies. Carly. Jung gave a name to this denied side, the shadow. Everyone carries their own, including you. The shadow is made of everything you've repressed, hidden, or refused to see. Unconfessable desires, unaccepted emotions, disguised anger, silenced will, masked ambition, hushed fears. These are aspects you tried to bury, but they remain alive, waiting for every chance to appear. And the more you try to ignore them, the more power they gain over your life. Remember the moments when you acted in completely unexpected ways, exploded without reason, lost good opportunities through self-sabotage, pushed away loved ones without understanding why. That's the shadow manifesting itself. It invades your thoughts, distorts feelings, dictates attitudes without you noticing. Jung knew this. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Don't delude yourself thinking suffering is just bad luck or injustice. Often, it's the shadow taking control. The great challenge here is that finding your shadow requires courage. You'll have to face everything you've spent your life trying to avoid, admitting flaws, accepting impulses, looking at your darkest areas, and stopping yourself from playing the victim. The secret, however, is this. The shadow is not your enemy. It's an essential part of who you are. It just wants to be recognized, embraced, and integrated into your whole self. Jung never proposed eliminating the shadow. He taught embracing it, integrating it as a source of power, clarity, and authenticity. What you reject consumes your strength. What you integrate returns freedom. Now that you've recognized your shadow, you need to go further, knowing what to do with it. Let's talk about the path of courage, the real beginning of healing, and how to take your first step to reunite the forgotten parts of yourself. Self-knowledge doesn't end when you find your shadow. It only begins. The true watershed moment is what you do from there forward. Getting this far is already an honest achievement. You've faced your disconnection, allowed yourself to look inward, and now you're facing the greatest challenge, confrontation. Just understanding isn't enough. Healing requires movement. It demands courageous action, sometimes uncomfortable, but absolutely fundamental. Because few have the courage to traverse their own internal nights without closing their eyes, as Jung said. The path back to yourself is for the brave, and courage isn't the absence of fear, but moving forward despite feeling it. Facing the unconscious means treading dark paths where nothing is under control, stripping away the characters, ceasing to victimize yourself, and accepting that part of the suffering is born from your own choices. This is only possible with radical honesty, abandoning the old lies we tell ourselves. And how does this happen, after all, in real life? It's noticing the ignored signals from your body, the stomach that turns when you're with people you pretend to be fine with, the oppression in your chest every time you accept situations that diminish you, the profound fatigue of maintaining appearances. Each symptom is an alert from your unconscious. It's there trying to protect you, not sabotage you. You can begin this journey with simple and consistent actions. Record your dreams. Pay attention to moments when your emotions become unstable. Question patterns that repeat in your life. Whenever something disrupts your balance, stop and ask, what hidden message exists in this? The unconscious communicates through symbols and sensations, and your job now is to learn this language with curiosity and patience, willing to truly listen to yourself. Not to relieve discomfort, but to face what most needs to be seen. One of the most transformative tools is deep writing. Set aside a few minutes of your day to write without censorship, as if no one would read it. Confess your most uncomfortable feelings, admit your fears, your doubts, your hidden desires. When you put on paper what you've always hidden from yourself, these shadows lose their power to paralyze you. Another great ally in this journey is therapy, whether with a psychologist or someone qualified to help you understand the messages from your unconscious. Jung argued that the unconscious is not a garbage dump, but a living organism full of wisdom and purpose. It wants to guide you, heal you, but first needs to be listened to, free from excuses or self-sabotage. Do you really want to free yourself from suffering? Then stop running. While you run, the pain strengthens. It's only by facing it head-on, with courage, that it begins to transform. And that's when you discover the pain you fear so much is, in fact, a passage to a new level of self-knowledge and freedom. This is exactly what we'll explore in the next stage. What is the real meaning of pain in your journey? Why does it insist on returning, even when you feel you're in control? And most crucially, how can you transform this suffering into your greatest strength on the path to freedom? Are you prepared to see from another angle? Then follow me. Most people spend their lives trying to erase any discomfort. They resort to medications, immerse themselves in distractions, get lost in superficial relationships, seek quick pleasures, build a perfect facade on social media, all to numb what they feel inside. But there's a difficult truth to face. The more you try to escape pain, the stronger it becomes. Pain didn't come to be extinguished, but to be listened to. Jung saw suffering not as a failure, but as an invitation to profound change. Pain is a sign that something is misaligned within you, something that demands attention and healing. It's an urgent request from the soul. This can't go on anymore. In each pain lives a message. In each anguish, a meaning waiting for your attention. The secret lies in changing your perspective. Stop seeing pain as an enemy and start receiving it as a teacher. Think about all the major changes that have happened in your life. Did any of them arise from absolute comfort? Almost never. Chaos is the ground where new order is born. In pain, the psyche asks for rebirth. And yes, that's where genuine transformation begins. Jung said, "Suffering that is avoided is never overcome. It needs to be lived through to the end. There is no liberation without crossing through." Let's bring this topic down to everyday life. Look at that person who gives up themselves for others, saying yes when they wanted to say no, smiling to hide discomfort, trying to please everyone. Over time, anxiety emerges, exhaustion, sadness, without tangible cause. They consult specialists, follow treatments, but the emptiness persists because nothing external erases the suffering of a life out of step with inner truth. Another classic case, someone who repeats painful cycles in relationships, always feeling rejected, never good enough, unconsciously choosing people who cannot truly love. This suffering isn't bad luck. It's a reflection, a pattern, an old story asking for recognition and healing. As long as you don't look at this wound, pain becomes a constant companion. Interpreting suffering as the language of the soul changes everything. What seemed like punishment actually comes to offer direction. Suffering reveals paths to be traveled. And when you allow yourself to listen, you can transform your pain into the foundation of the deepest healing, because it's pain that forces the encounter with yourself. The responsibility is clear. Ignoring suffering is ignoring your own essence. Running from it is repeating personal abandonment. With courage, humility, and curiosity, truly listening to what pain has to say, you can finally find a place of peace and integrity, not because everything out there has been fixed, but because you've reconnected with who you really are. In the next stage, we'll see what that other side is like. What happens when you stop fighting against pain and start embracing it? True healing doesn't mean eliminating all suffering, but transforming it into living consciousness. That's what awaits you in the next chapter. After so many encounters and missed connections with yourself, there comes a moment when change happens. It's not noisy, it doesn't happen in a burst, but settles in slowly, like a soft light that fills the room without announcing its arrival. At this point, resistance diminishes, and for the first time, you feel a novel peace, the peace of being whole. And what, after all, is this wholeness? It's creating space within yourself for everything that is yours, including the pains, flaws, imperfections. It means abandoning the internal war, letting go of the myth of perfection, and accepting yourself with compassion. You begin to realize that anger, fear, sadness, shame have their place and their reason. When these aspects are recognized and embraced rather than expelled, suffering begins to lose its reason for existing. For Jung, this was the process of individuation, a path not to become exceptional, but genuinely you. It's the authenticity that is born from reconciliation, from embracing your own shadows. It's not simply finding yourself, but perceiving yourself fully. Only those who have the courage to revisit the past and rebuild their own ruins can, in fact, become whole. At this stage, your pain ceases to be a secret or cause for shame. It is no longer who you are, but a trail you needed to cross. Each challenge and each fall reveal that the real purpose of pain was always the same: to remove everything that was a facade and allow only what is truth to remain. And this truth is neither simple nor comfortable. It doesn't protect from vulnerability. On the contrary, it asks for courage to expose yourself, demands presence and real choices. Because now, after seeing your shadow, understanding pain, and feeling the strength of being authentic, you can no longer accept living on autopilot. You will clearly perceive who adds to your life and who drains you. You will stop settling for crumbs just to avoid confrontation. You will allow yourself to say no without guilt, and learn to say yes to yourself without hesitation. This transformation happens in silence, but its reach is profound. It's not the emergence of a new person, but the end of the betrayal against your own truth. Then you understand an essential message that no one ever told you. You didn't need perfection to deserve love. It was enough to accept yourself, stop abandoning yourself, realize that the peace you sought so much out there was latent, waiting to be recognized within you. Still, there is a risk. It's easy to settle after pain. When old patterns change and life aligns, the temptation to stagnate appears. But there is one more step, the step Jung considered indispensable. Because complete healing only exists when your own light transforms into contribution. What will you do with this self-knowledge? How will you live now that you're awake? This is what we'll talk about finally. The responsible choice to exist with intention, purpose, and consciousness. Now, reborn, life asks more of you. You can no longer pretend you don't know. You heard, felt, and stayed. This already places you among the rare ones who don't run from truth. Now comes the real choice. Repeat old patterns or finally take command of your own path. What you suffered, what was done to you, all of this matters less than what you choose to do with it all from now on. The pain that accompanied you for so long can transform into power. The emptiness that seemed impossible to fill can become fertile space for new meanings, and the traumas that limited you can serve as impulse for a more authentic life instead of being eternal prisons. But there is a fundamental truth. There's no going back in consciousness. Once you see, you can no longer pretend blindness. Ignorance no longer serves as shelter. You've been called to a different level, and living at this level requires commitment. The commitment not to abandon yourself, not to accept crumbs, not to hide behind old justifications. No one is completely ready, and that's okay. The essential thing is to choose daily to live with attention, honesty, and courage, embracing your emotions and, above all, moving from thought to action. Because all learning that doesn't become action is just another cycle of self-deception. Jung said, "Becoming whole is the task of a lifetime. Perhaps today was your beginning in this journey. Suddenly you understood. You weren't broken, you were rebuilding yourself. And your suffering wasn't condemnation, but a sign, an insistent call to return to your true inner home. Now tell me, what impacted you most in this experience? What truth touched deeply? Write below. Firm up this commitment to yourself and perhaps open doors for the healing of others. If this video moved you, don't let the change cool down. The next chapter of this journey is coming. I'll be waiting for you in the next video.